Have you ever wondered if you've made a mistake in your family tree? Sometimes the records are confusing, and when you have multiple people in the same place at the same time with the same name, it can feel almost impossible. My number one tip for navigating all this confusion is to look for continuity in the stories that the records tell about your ancestors' lives. So here's 3 of the best ways that you can do that. Welcome to GenealCymru. My name is Di, and let's get into it. Work. Your ancestors' work can be a helpful tool for finding continuity. For tradespeople, they would have learned their skills from a master, and sometimes the apprenticeship was formalized by an indenture, some of which you can find online and in the archives. It's a bit blurry, but this is the 1801 indenture of Joseph Evans Thomas, the son of Timothy Thomas of Islington in London. And in this indenture, Joseph is being apprenticed to his father as a schoolmaster for 7 years. Timothy was a Baptist minister and schoolmaster, a trade he inherited from his father, who was from Carmarthenshire and who was known as the historian of the Welsh Baptists. His mother was a lady from Cardiganshire and a sister of my 8 times great-grandmother. I've only found records like these for my ancestors who went to London, so I'm not sure how often formal indentures like this were happening outside of the big cities. If you've found these kinds of records for other places, definitely let me know where down in the comments. What happened most often is that trades knowledge was passed informally to children by their parents and other relatives. So in my line of rural blacksmiths, my 5 times great-grandfather Evan David taught 3 of his sons his trades knowledge. His other son, Isaac, didn't become a blacksmith, though. Instead, he became a hatter, which was another trade that required a lot of training with a master. That actually happened a lot, where the children of families involved in the trades would pick up a different but equivalent trade. Another trend that I've noticed is that it's actually really common for landowning families in Cardiganshire to send their children off to become drapers. But even though the specific trade may change, you'll notice that all of these jobs still give them access to similar kinds of social status. The big thing with the trades is that you won't just change your trade overnight. So if your ancestor is a smith in 1 year and a shoemaker in the next, you've probably got something wrong. And what might be going on is that you're looking at a different person with the same name. In fact, there was this belief that past a certain age, it was no longer worth it to train people in a trade. This became a problem in the early 20th century in industrialized communities where boys would be offered blind alley jobs. These were jobs that had them run errands, deliver messages, or work in unskilled factory work. Because these were seen as unskilled jobs, their employers gave them no training or long-term security, and when they were about 18 or 19, they were fired and replaced with younger children. According to Dr. Krista Cowman, at this point they were usually considered too old for training, so they were restricted to unskilled, low-paid jobs or to unemployment. So work is a really great place to start when looking for hints of continuity. Another place to look for continuity is in social class, and the attributes that hint at social class, like literacy and land ownership. As we know with royal family trees, there are cultural practices that help to consolidate wealth and power. Marry your cousin. A lot of wealthy families practiced cousin marriage, which would prevent their estates from being divided up and sold off. Here's an example from my own research of just how prevalent cousin marriage can be in some families. So this is the Presbyterian minister, the Reverend Timothy Davis of Cellan in Cardiganshire. We're going to follow one line of his descendants and look at all the cousin marriages. Firstly, his mother was Sarah Jones, who came from a prominent Puritan family. Sarah's brother's daughter, Mary, became Timothy's wife. So that's the first cousin marriage. 2 of their children, Sarah and Evan, married siblings. Sarah married an Evan, and Evan married a Jane. Both of them were the children of Timothy's sibling. Sarah's son, Evan, married Jane Walters, a daughter of my 6 times great-grandparents. Their grandson, David, married Sarah Jenkins, who was a great-great-granddaughter of Reverend Timothy Davis, another cousin marriage. And Sarah Jenkins' brother married David's nephew, another cousin marriage. And there's still more research for me to do on this family, so there will be even more cousin marriages. This marriage pattern, it happened all across that family. And over time, members of the large extended family all occupied the same kind of social class. They were wealthy in the 16 and 1700s, and the many descendant lines that I've traced so far were still wealthy by the end of the 1800s and into the 1900s. There are always outliers, though. One of the big ones in my family tree is Joseph Jenkins. He was a great-grandson of my 8 times great-grandparents. He came from a wealthy family, they owned land, they were of the literary and religious class, and he himself lived at Trekevel Farm in Tregaron, and farmed around 175 acres and had a host of servants. And one day, he just left, and took a ship to Australia where he became known as Joseph the Swagman, working as a traveling laborer, digging ditches, and living in a small dilapidated cottage. And then one day, years later, he just returned to Wales to his big house, acres of land, and a host of servants. This is a situation where you really need to move carefully through the records, because this easily could have been 2 different people. This last one is kind of tricky. You want to look for continuity, but without forgetting that for some classes of people, change is the constant. In some places, there are major historical events and conflicts that uprooted people, migration that thrust people into totally new worlds, and even when those aren't really the case, you often see a lot of change in the records for poor people. My Grampy's mother's paternal line is a great example of this, particularly my 4 times great-grandfather Enoch Bellew. He was born into a family of agricultural laborers, which is the kind of work he ended up doing. Continuity. But the change came in where he went to find work. By the age of 21, he had already left where he was born in Westley in Devon, and was living as a laborer on Little Frederick Street in Cardiff. Change. He was a boarder at the time, living with a family of Dendels, who I eventually found out were his sister, brother-in-law, and their children. Continuity. In 1846, he's back living in Devon in the parish of East Appledore, where he gets married. They soon move not too far away to Bideford, where he's caught having robbed a shipwreck of 7 pounds worth of cayenne pepper. Then to Fremington, where in 1854, he literally disappears. I don't mean I can't find him in the records, I mean that he absconded, abandoning his wife and children with 2 of his buddies. The overseers of the poor put a reward out for information about him, because by abandoning his family, they needed to be put under the charge of the parish poor relief, and the overseers tended to want as few people accessing those funds as possible. But by 1861, he's back with his family and living in Westley again. Then off to Horwood, still working as an agricultural laborer, then to Yeland. By around 1878, one of Enoch's sons is grown up and he goes back to Wales as a young adult, like his father did before him. This time to Swansea, where he lived for the rest of his life. More continuity. And finally, Enoch passes away in 1884 in Barnstable. So while he stayed in the same general neighborhood of Barnstable and Bideford, that's a lot of moving around, especially in comparison to anyone who owned or rented land at the time. And my ancestors in Wales who were poor like Enoch lived similar lives where there's this complex mix of continuity and change and migration. Yet even behind the change, there's these through lines of historical continuity as well. North Devon and South Wales have long been interconnected economically, and as the coal fields in South Wales expanded in the 18th and 19th centuries, lots of workers from North Devon followed the demand for a larger workforce. So it wasn't just Enoch who left Devon to Wales, it was a whole class of people who were like him who were going. So the overall takeaway is that you need to look for continuity in the records and the stories that you tell with them, even when you see a lot of change happening. It's never enough to just go same name, same person, because there have always been people with the same name in the same place, and my Welsh genealogy researchers know very well that there may be 10 to 20 people in the same parish at the same time with the same name. So let me know down in the comments where you found continuity in your ancestors' stories. And definitely let me know if you found stories where continuity hasn't been the case. And if you'd like to learn about migration and travel in 19th century Britain, why not check out this next video?